but no one, not a
Yeah.
single other person on the planet, not your twin, not your siblings, no one has experienced the same things that you have. You are totally unique as an individual through your experiences and your perspective on life.
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. You know, I think we all realize at this point, and regardless of what your opinion is about COVID and the pandemic that engulfed our globe and really changed a lot of lives, you know, in many cases, it caused us all to take stock of our lives and wonder what's our purpose. You know, for some people like me, my family suffered some job loss. We were forced to relocate. And the stories of the last few years are really across the map. But how do we navigate these challenges when they come up, whether, you know, they're in business or in life? Fighting through that feeling of frustration or being trapped can have a lingering effect that holds us back sometimes. But the good news is it doesn't have to be like that. So welcome to the podcast, Eric Beschinski. Now, Eric is an entrepreneur, a consultant, international best-selling author, and TEDx speaker. Now, his purpose, and I love this, is helping others, specifically small and medium-sized businesses, go to the next level, which is certainly a worthwhile purpose. Eric, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Eric, now we had quite the conversation here recently. And I should also mention that we met as part of an ongoing book collaboration series called Cracking the Rich Code. That's a book that was done with Jim Britt and Kevin Harrington and endorsed by Tony Robbins. So it's a pretty cool thing, you know, but before we touch on that, Eric, tell everyone a little about yourself and maybe what you consider to be your unique superpower, because I know you have one because you're an author.
Well, yeah, so I'm what I would say is a typical guy, right? I have a family and do yard work and try to run a business and work and have purpose. And like most typical guys, right, I have a lot of mundane things about my life and my history and my experiences, but I have a few extraordinary things about me as well. And I would say that's true for everyone, that every human being on the planet has a higher purpose, some reason God put them here that's bigger than just raising a family, bigger than just, working every day. There's something that they're supposed to be about. And so I discovered several years ago, my higher purpose was to help other people find and fulfill their purpose. And so I've built my entire business around that. But to answer the second part of your question, my superpower, probably, if I had to define that, I would say is systems. I see how to build systems within our processes, whatever you want to call it, within a business or within a family or whatever. I see ways to make something systematic because systems are the key to solving almost every problem.
How did that come about, Eric? How do you, because I'm not always a systems guy. I try to be very orderly, but it doesn't always work out for me. How did you come about that?
Well, I believe that it was just kind of hardwired. Like, this is what my God has built me to think like and to excel at. And so, everybody's got something different that happens to be mine. I didn't ask to be that way. And of course, things can be developed and almost any skill set can be learned, right? So I don't want to say like it's something magical that only I can do. Not at all the case. Anybody can learn to be system oriented, but all of us are gifted with talents and abilities that are innate for us. And for me, that's what that one is.
So how do you go about taking your gift and helping typically small business owners? How do you help them? Because I'm sure what you find out is that a lot of guys are flying by the seat of their pants, right? So how do you help them put a system in place and implement it that helps them, and not only in their business, but if you're helping somebody in the workplace, you're helping them in their life, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first book was my methodology that I've developed over the last 15 or so years. got it out there. I wanted it to be available for people because obviously I can't work with everyone.
Yeah.
So my methodology is out there. It's called the iNautilus Guide for Organizational Navigation. And that was the first book. The second book is the same methodology retooled for the individual. It's called the Nautilus Guide for Personal Navigation. And the idea is the methodology works for both, right? And even though I started with the organizational level, and that's where my primary target market is, as I'm working with business owners, it really comes down to the personal. So I don't call myself a life coach. I don't want to be a life coach, but I do a lot of life coaching. So it's part of what I do in my business. And the reason is, for most of us entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small business owners, our business is an extension of our higher purpose in life. And a lot of times we don't realize that. And so we end up wandering, right? We go through this, I'm just here to, do this until something better comes along, or I inherited this business from my family, or I started this business thinking it'd be a lot of fun and it's turned out to be challenging or not so much fun. And so for those people, what I can do is come alongside them and coach them one-on-one. So I call myself the Chris Como of the business world. So I don't know if you know who Chris Como is, but he was Tiger Woods' swing coach. Yeah. And so, that's what I do is I come alongside the entrepreneurs, the business owners who are successful and love what they do or are good at what they do. And I help them to align their business with their calling.
I think it's funny that you use Tiger Woods as an example. And listen, I do this quite a bit. I think probably the same reason you do is that, and guys are kind of funny like this. Like, we will hire somebody to help us with our golf game. We'll hire a guide if we can catch more fish. We will hire coaches for everything, strangely enough, except for ourselves. The very person you have to live with on a daily basis, we kind of push that back into second place. But if Tiger Woods needs somebody to just make sure that his golf swing is, although at this point it's not his golf swing that's killing him, it's his body. But if Tiger Woods needs somebody to help make sure that his swing stays on track, doesn't it make sense that periodically, maybe not all the time, but from time to time, you need somebody to help you stay on track?
Absolutely. That's the entire point. If the best athletes in the world, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, if they need coaches, then who are we to think we don't? That would be insane, right? And so specifically, I focus in the business world, but I mean, obviously there's life coaches. There are, I have a mentor that I work with, and that can be an informal thing. It doesn't have to be I'm going to pay this person X dollars for my mentor. It's an informal thing. And the relationship flips. The last few months, I've been mentoring him more than he's been mentoring me. And because of situations have changed a little bit, and that's okay. That's relationship, right? But yeah, it's fascinating to me how stubborn we are sometimes about some things, and coaching is one of those.
Yeah, and I'll take that a step further. I'll talk about Tom Brady. I'll pick on another athlete, and I think it's good sometimes to compare athletes because a lot of it has to do with how they prepare. So, does Tom Brady work his tail off? Yeah. Ask somebody like Tom Brady how many hours he spent, or Peyton Manning for that matter. How many hours did they spend in the tape room watching replays of not only who they were preparing for, but of themselves to make sure that they could do it better? And, there probably isn't even a number those guys could put on, and it's baseball season. So how many now, what's interesting is, they've got iPads in the dugout. And what do after they get an at-bat? A lot of these guys go back to the dugout, grab the iPad, and replay their at-bat. Why did they do that? Because they're trying to get better and learn. And I think there's a lesson there for not only us as men in our personal life, But in our business life, I mean, if these guys are watching tape of what they did, they're trying to perform better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a message there. What do you think?
Absolutely. And combine that with something you said a minute ago. You talked about Tiger Woods getting older, right? And so his body has changed. I saw an interview
I can
of
relate.
Chris Como. What's that?
I said I can relate.
Right. Yeah, we all can, right? To Chris Como talking about that relationship with Tiger Woods and how when he came in, he was looking back at when Tiger Woods was most effective, when his swing was the most effective. And he said, okay, now let's replicate that, because you've changed 20 times since then what you do, right?
Yeah.
And obviously always trying to improve. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We're always trying to get better at what we do. And so little changes here and there. Well, that didn't work. Let's try this. That didn't work. Let's try this. Ooh, that's a little better. Let's try it. That's constant and ongoing. But what happens is sometimes it takes us away from what was working. And so in his case, he was looking back at, this is when you were most effective. However, we can't just replicate that now because you're 6 years older. Your body has changed. Your muscles have changed. So how do we adapt what you did 6 years ago with your body now? And obviously this analogy breaks down when it comes to business a little bit, but the whole idea is things have changed, circumstances have changed, the world has changed, right? So how do we adapt what worked then within the confines of what is now? And so that's what it requires, an outside perspective, because no matter how good you are at self-reflection or self-awareness, there are still going to be blind spots, and that's where a coach can see.
How have the blind spots you've run into in your life helped transform you to be a better coach?
Well, there's a lot of them. A lot of it comes down to having people who we have to be willing to hear. We have to be willing to let people speak truth into our lives. And so they have to be people we can trust, right? Because if Bob walking down the street says you're a jerk, okay, that's going to roll off my back. I mean, it might make me mad, but it's going to roll off my back, or I'm not going to internalize that. However, if my wife says you're a jerk, oh, well, that's different, right? Because this is somebody you trust and who's in your life and has permission to speak into your life. And hopefully that's just an isolated incident and not an ongoing situation. But, those are the things that we need to listen. And so when we take those people in our lives that can speak into our lives and we give them permission to do so, we can learn what those blind spots are and begin to combat them. So for me, I learned a long time ago, I've been in sales for a long time. And sales is one of those skills that can be learned. Yep. I absolutely believe that. And I have learned to be an average salesperson. I'm never going to be a superstar. I don't have that in me. It's not how I'm wired. I'm not one of those guys who just goes out and knows how to sell and can talk anybody into anything. It doesn't work for me. So I had to learn to overcome, hey, this is not something that is in my wheelhouse. I've got to actually develop a skill. And developing skills requires reps and focus and attention and planning and exercise and so it's work. It requires work.
It's like practice. Wow, there's just all kinds of athletic analogies going on here.
And I'm not even a sports guy. Like I watch Bears football because I live in Northwest Indiana, and that's really about it. So.
Well, it seems to me you don't have much choice then. You got to watch Notre Dame football every weekend, right?
That's nearby as well. Yep.
Well, I do know a little bit about Indiana, but Eric, talk a little bit about, we had an interesting conversation, and I do think that there's tremendous merit in this story because you were talking about an accident that you and your wife were involved in, and I think this is an important because it's a pivotal point in your life, right? And it probably has made you incredibly grateful for a lot of things.
Yep.
But I mean, I'm not happy you had the accident, but I'd love for you to tell the story because I think it has a very positive outcome. Yeah.
And we're still, I'll get into it. So we're we're still, not recovering. We're fine physically, but there's still
Yeah.
ramifications that we don't even know yet. But this happened 2 years ago, I think this coming Sunday.
Oh, wow.
May 21st, 2021. It was a Friday. It was one of the first nice days of the season. It was 80 degrees. They're going to be 80 degrees. And that morning, I'm working in my home office, and I had been wrestling with this idea. I developed training programs and coaching systems and things around a variety of different topics, but I've been struggling to find some unifying theme, something that ties it all together, that made sense and was no longer, oh, well, I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, right? Something. So I talked to my mentor that morning and was going back through my notes and my journals and different things, and I came across a couple sketches from months prior, and I was looking at them, and I developed them further, and I realized I think I figured it out. I think I figured out what I've been looking for. And so my wife texted me, and she's like, it's a beautiful day. If I come home from work early, you want to go for a motorcycle ride? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So she came home at lunchtime, and while she was eating lunch, I'm showing her what I developed that morning and just hand sketched on a piece of scrap paper. I'm like, I think this is the answer. I think this is what I've been looking for. She said, absolutely, that's what you've been looking for. And this is going to change your audience. Okay, let's go for a ride. So we get on the motorcycle. Again, beautiful 80-degree day. I'm in t-shirt. We don't normally wear helmets. We'll talk about that more later if you want to. But so we get on the bike and start riding. And 15 minutes into our ride, we hit a deer at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In a heavily trafficked area in front of a Walmart, 2-lane road each direction, state highway, middle of the afternoon. Deer crossed 3 lanes of traffic and timed it perfectly that we T-boned it at 60. Flew off the bike, skidded across the pavement. My wife landed on her arms and then head. And, so we're fortunately, in one sense, we were at a stoplight before this happened. And so I was the first at the stoplight. And if you've ever ridden or done anything like that, it's fun to go fast. So I accelerated quickly out of the stoplight for 2 reasons. Number one, it's fun. And number two, I like to get separation from me and the cars behind me. And in case I hit a deer at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah. And
so right. And landed on the road. And, so I knew there were cars coming. So we're scrambling to get off the road. And I thought my leg was broken. My wife is yelling, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No." And so we get off the road, and the blessings that started there were amazing. I can't. Number one, we survived. Like, we flew off of a motorcycle onto asphalt at 60 miles an hour and didn't die. Right. Yeah. So there was that. Were
you thinking in the moment though, what a blessing this is?
Oh, absolutely not. No. And I have something I self-diagnosed, but it's through experience, vasovagal syncope. So I tend to pass out if certain triggers, usually it's pain, whatever. There was no passing out. It was just so much pain that it was way beyond that. And it was just constant. Again, I thought my leg was broken, despite my road rash up and down both arms. Yeah. That was the pain, was the leg. And I don't, to this day, I have no idea what I did. I don't know if it got caught between the handlebars and the bike or something, but whatever it did, twisted the knee, hurt the calf. I think it was a bone bruise, but I don't know. All of that to say, I was on the ground, crawling across the road, trying to get off. And my wife was doing the same, and she was speaking, which was good. So I thought everything was okay. Yeah. An Army medic was the first on the scene. He was in a car behind us. And so he jumped out and was tending to us. An ambulance was on its way empty to the hospital and stopped and was attending to us while
what are the chances?
Right. It was amazing. My wife was airlifted to Oaklawn Hospital for head trauma. And I was taken to the local hospital here in Porter County. And so we were separated quickly. And one of the things they don't tell you is how uncomfortable the ambulance ride is. You don't hear about that part. You just constantly feel like you're going to fall, and you're not, because you're strapped in, but wow, it's not pleasant. And then you get there, and it was a blur. Lots of activity. Of course, my wife didn't have her phone, or she did have her phone, but she was out of it, and head swelling had begun, with brain swelling, or whatever happened. And so anyway, she was being taken to Oak Lawn. I was taken to Porter, and that was just kind of surreal. You go through this experience, and my parents ended up at the hospital. We called them from the scene. We have 6 kids between us, and they're all grown now except for one. We have an 11-year-old. And again, this was at 1:00 in the afternoon. So by the time we're leaving the scene, it was, get my wife's daughter on the phone to get home to be with the 11-year-old and get him so he doesn't freak out and he's not home alone. Or he wasn't 11 at the time, he is now. So it's all that, arranging all that stuff, and then she's gone, and I'm in the hospital, and nobody knew where she was or how to get a hold of her. So for a while, there was a lot of, where is she? And the hospital didn't know. And, finally got in touch, and she was doing well. They kept her only one night, and, had a concussion and a couple cracked ribs. I had road rash up and down both arms. And like I said, my leg was injured, but not broken. So, pretty miraculous that was the extent of our injuries. And of course, there's recovery time and all that. But then we were at a wedding about 2 weeks after, and got a picture, and you could hardly tell that, we had had anything happen to us. So we were very blessed. That night, I'm sitting on the couch after the accident that Friday night. My mom and dad had ran to get food and prescriptions and stuff. I'm sitting there by myself. My phone was gone, didn't know where it was. So I'm on my iPad trying to get into everything, and email and all the stuff, and be able to reach people and let them know that I'm alive and all this stuff. And just so many weird stories about that day came out later. For example, a friend of ours that we hadn't seen in, I think, since New Year's, she and her husband ride, and they were on the same road we had our accident on that morning around 9:00. Saw a motorcycle go by, thought about us, prayed for our safety that morning before the accident. That's just God, right? There's just no other explanation for that.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the couch that night waiting, by that time I knew where my wife was. We talked, and, I knew she was okay, and thinking about the events of that day. And have you ever had those moments where you think of something and there's no way you can possibly know that it's true, but somehow it just clicks in your head like, yep, that's real? You ever have that experience?
Happens often. Yeah.
So my thought sitting on the couch that night was, that was no accident. We were both, and still are, called to this business, and she's an entrepreneur as well. And we feel called. We feel like we're on the right path. We feel like we're doing what God has intended for us. We have some spiritual battles with things going on with our kids, but we felt, and we really truly believe that was intended to kill us that day, and that God protected us that day. And so that clicked for me that night. And then the spiritual battles just began to unfold as even way bigger than we ever thought. So I call that day my personal Pearl Harbor, because what was meant to destroy us got us into the battle. And so we're Protestant. We go to a Nazarene church, and we've had, my wife's had Vineyard past, I've had non-denominational past. So we've been in church a long time, but now we're attending a Nazarene church, and they, as well as the previous church we attended, Vineyard, Lent is part of the worship experience. And I always grew up thinking that was just a Catholic thing, and found out later, nope, it's much broader than that. And so we've been observing Lent the last few years. And this year we actually did a traditional Jewish fast where we did not eat during daylight hours from sun up to sundown. And, we took that time as a spiritual warfare, and we are praying together every morning as a couple, and really battling, standing on the foundation of Christ, and how to, and we're not through all of this yet by any means, but we're, I think, beginning to see some of the fruits of that 40-day or 46-day adventure of fasting. So, it's interesting. The battle battles may end, the war doesn't until he comes back, but we have a role in that, and it's tied in with our purpose. And so the enemy doesn't want us to know our purpose, because that'll get us into the battle, and he definitely doesn't want us to
that's an interesting point. Did you feel like that the spiritual warfare that was going on was, I don't even know what the right word is, quite honestly, Eric. Was it as prevalent prior to the accident as it was after?
No. I mean, I call myself an intellectual Christian. So as a term I heard from a deacon years ago, that I'm like, that really, I identify with that, because I've been a believer since I was a kid. I grew up in a Christian home, but Christianity makes sense to me. The whole idea of there's this all-powerful being that created everything and created it good and wanted relationship with us, and then we broke it. We broke that relationship. Yeah. And for 6,000 years, he was working, trying to restore relationship with his masterpiece, his primary creation. And we just continued to break covenant with him. And so finally he's like, fine, if you can't do it, I'll do it. And so he sent his son. And so to me, that just makes sense, right? It's just logical. It's a redemptive story is totally. And so I was going somewhere with all that. This idea of being an intellectual Christian, I know of the spiritual world, and I know that spiritual warfare exists. And I haven't had a whole lot of encounters with it per se. There've been a few, but it isn't my go-to. I don't, whenever something bad happens, we live in a broken world. And so most of the time my thought is it's just normal. It's just, I don't believe in coincidence, but at the same time, it's just the way things are. I don't necessarily go to demons and, the spiritual world as my go-to.
Yeah. I mean, you described yourself as kind of a regular guy. I consider myself a regular guy. Deep theological stuff, that surpasses my understanding. God bless people that have that kind of knowledge. But I think, part of the battle that some people miss, Eric, and that I think you realize is that they don't understand that spiritual warfare even exists. Mm-hmm. That, their thoughts may not always be their own. They may be, part of, the evil one working his evil little magic, right? Yeah. And I'm sure it just steamed the devil to no end, right? You survived a motorcycle accident, and he was trying to break up the family, right?
Right. Yeah. And we had and we're not on the other side of this yet, but there was spiritual warfare going on in our home that we weren't aware of. Yeah. It was while we were recovering on the couch, a few days after that, we began to discover the depth of the warfare there was evil in our home that we weren't aware of. And I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details because I don't want to, but it was ugly, and it led to some really hard conversations, and some broken relationship that is still on the mend. And it's going to be challenging as long as the decisions are continuing to be made, but they're not in our home anymore.
Do you feel that your awareness of this battle that is, prevalent every day, do you feel like it's drawing you closer to God and in I guess enhancing your overall life as a result? I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say, right? Oh, there's a spiritual battle going. I mean, this is the battle every day that we wage. It's the battle between light and darkness.
Yeah.
And, but when you have that awareness, you at the very least know what you're fighting for or against.
Yeah.
And to me, that's half the battle.
Yeah. People say all the time, I was just had this conversation with my wife, a month or two ago, prayer and the things in church, they always say, draw closer to God or this drew me closer. I don't know. I don't know if it's just me but I'm not a touchy-feely guy to begin with. So that doesn't, I am close to God, and I don't seem to really ever get further away or closer. Now there are moments where it's like, okay, I take the time to pray or I'm reading in my Bible or connection or whatever, but it just is. My relationship with him is steady, so I don't know that it necessarily drew me closer to him, but it definitely brought all of those things to the forefront of my awareness. Like, I'm more intentional about them. And again, this whole season of Lent that ended at Easter, we intentionally were battling for our kids and for our finances and for our home for 40 days, 46, but 40 days, so for those of you why I keep saying that is because Lent is 46 days, but in the tradition of Christianity, the Sundays are kind of like a break, a cheat day, whatever you want to call it. So you fast for 6 days, take one off. And so over the course of this, from Ash Wednesday to Easter is 46 days because you take out the Sunday. So a little history lesson for everyone there, which I only learned a few years ago. So anyway, that's what we did. And so that intense, drawing nearer to him. But do I feel it? No, I'm not one of those who gets that emotional connection. My wife is more like that. I think women tend to be more like that.
Yeah.
It comes back to what I said earlier. I truly view my relationship with him as more of an intellectual, and not that there's no heart component to it. There absolutely is, but it's just, there's this strong intellectual, I get it. I understand not everything, but there are things I understand about him and why he does what he does that make me appreciate. And it's through that intellect, through that understanding that he and I connect.
How do you feel like going through this has affected you as a business person? Has it given you maybe some additional clarity that and wisdom that you can pass on to the people that you're serving?
Yeah. I mean, just for one example, I did my first TEDx in January, and what arose from that epiphany I had that morning was what I did my TEDx on, and that was the 8 essential questions. And so these are 8 questions that I believe everyone should ask, because it comes down to purpose, vision, identity, relationship with God. All of these things are covered in these 8 questions. And at the end of the questions, I told the story of the motorcycle crash and, that epiphany that morning, and all these things are part. So yeah, it led to all of that. And that was, so it definitely brought some passion and purpose to where I was going with my company. And so obviously that helps me with my clients as well, because number one, we are human beings and we relate to human beings. So if I'm out there talking all about business and I can help you with your business and this is what I do, whatever, it gets very monotonous and it doesn't connect.
Yeah.
So when you can talk, hey, look, I've been through a divorce. I'm remarried. We have 6 kids between the 2 of us. Life is hard. And, then you get in a motorcycle, like there's life, right? And so I can relate to those things. And even the things that other people experience that I can't relate to, it's okay, because we all have things that we've dealt with. And so it's those human aspects, those personal stories that help us to understand that, hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah, I think that's right. We all have a story or two. I'm convinced we all have gone through a pivotal point in our life Typically, we all have a comeback story of some kind to tell. And I think there's tremendous value in that. I mean, I'm a little like you. I don't ever look at myself and go, oh, well, I've got this extraordinary, but yet things happen in our life that send us down a path that, you know, you can look back on and go, wow, I never really thought of it that way. I didn't realize why I went down road. Why, you know, what was the, and I think there's tremendous value in it. I would not suggest, you know, living in the past.
Nope.
You know, I would not suggest that. I would actually suggest, you know, think about where you've been. If there's a wound there, you know, try to resolve that wound in order to push you forward. And that's, to me, that's the only way, you know, to get beyond things. So, you know, I'm glad that you and your wife survived that accident and have been able to push forward. And my guess is, as the years go on, that there will be additional things that unveil themselves as a result of that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I've, like I said, I grew up in a Christian home. I don't have some dramatic conversion story, right? Like, so much of life is mundane, right? But no one, not a single other person on the planet, not your twin, not your siblings, no one has experienced the same things that you have. You are totally unique as an individual through your experiences and your perspective on life. And so one has something to offer. And whether that's, you know, a craft with your hands, or a book with your mind, or words, or whatever that is, everyone has something to offer because everyone's story is unique.
I wholeheartedly agree. That's, I mean, I got to say, I didn't ever set out to become an author. I don't know if you experience this, but all of a sudden, when you start doing a little bit of writing, in many respects, it's kind of cathartic, right? There's like stuff that comes out that you're like, whoa, I didn't know that was in there. And it's quite a process to go through. I will say, for me, quite challenging, you know, just because I don't sit very well. Maybe I should figure out a way to write on the go, I guess, talking to my phone maybe. But, you know, I consider it to be a huge challenge, but I've learned a lot, not even on the book, but, you know, doing the podcast in many ways, just hearing stories like yours. And I think it's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly important that these stories get out there, because somebody's sitting on the sidelines right now going, man, I don't know if I can get through this. I took a call last night, you know, somebody saying to me, man, I thought this was it for me. I thought I was just going to end it all, you know, because I just didn't want the pain anymore. And, you know, so these stories have value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, my wife says all the time, because we know people who are not believers, and you know, she's like, oh, how can you believe, you know, when all these things happen? How can you believe in a God or whatever? And she's like, I can't imagine going through all this stuff without him. Like, that's way harder than having a God. I mean, again, it's not all his fault. Like, he didn't do this stuff to us, right? There's an enemy who is actively trying to kill, steal, and destroy. Like, that is his purpose. He wants us separated from God. He wants us to be ineffective. And then we live in a broken world that we broke. We did it, right? We broke this world. And so there are consequences, and there are hardships and things that have nothing to do with God punishing us, right? But then sometimes God is like, hey, you know what? I want you to go this way. And if you don't, I'm going to throw roadblock after roadblock after roadblock until you finally listen and go where I want you to go, right? Not all the time, but sometimes. And so there are all these things coming in to play, and we don't necessarily know which is which. So we just have to listen. We have to, you know, be in prayer and be in tune with God as much as we can, and say, okay, Lord, I want to be obedient. So how do I do that well?
Amen to that. Eric, tell everybody as we wrap up today, how can they get a hold of you? We will, of course, as always, put this information in the show notes, but how can they get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. So website right above me here, ongreenfire.com/hello. It takes you right to the hello page on my site. It's got some free resources and things. All my socials are there. So, I mean, that's just the easiest way to get right to me. And then if there's something in particular that you're like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I'd like to just to dive in with some free resources or a challenge or whatever, that's all on that page.
Awesome. And I love the fact that you have your website up on your, if you're watching this on video, and it blends in very nicely with my logo as well. So, I mean, I'm exceptionally grateful for that. Eric, it was awesome having you on today, and I appreciate you coming on and telling your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike, and it's been fun, and yeah, appreciate it.
You bet. Take care.